Welcome back to another episode of Drilling It Down. This is your host, Wes Lyon, co-hosting Mario Santiago. We got part 2 of the private equity stuff.
All right, let's get into it. I'm excited.
Yes, for those of you that didn't listen to part 1, recommend you listen to that one first. Part 2, we are going to talk about how this impacts dentistry, and we found some very interesting public articles not on dental websites relating to this.
I really try not to talk about dentistry on the last one, Wes. It was tempting, but we try to keep it on private equity. Now we'll talk about dentistry.
Yes, if you didn't listen to last week, we don't really recommend investing in private equity. Now we kind of flipped the script. We want to give an update on, hey, kind of what's going on. I think when this first started, we were hearing great stories. People were talking about how wonderful it was, how much money they got, and now we're kind of hearing the opposite. And apparently the opposite has made its way into the public realm. And also, there is a Senate investigation and report, which is pretty fascinating here.
Yeah.
So
dentists are making it on the news. I don't know if this one's a great one, but...
Oh, look, I didn't even realize this. This report's from 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently this was on their radar screen well before this got started. But even still, I think it applies today, and there's some very interesting tidbits in there.
Yeah, and basically what they have found in a lot of these reports and a lot of these investigations is that a lot of dental, let's just call them dental offices for now, a lot of dental offices are overtreating. And one of the concerning articles was overtreating children. So I think that's where a lot of people started drawing the line, and a lot of it has to do with Medicaid. But it's really becoming an important topic now because as we work with a lot of independent dentists, they're trying to find ways to make sure that their patients are taken care of. And we're just finding that not every dentist is made the same. And you go to one dental office and you might get recommended 10 things, and you go to the independent dentist and you don't get recommended anything. This happened to you, right, Wes?
This did. I got 3 crowns put in my mouth. I showed up the next time and they were going to put 3 more in my mouth. So I decided to get a second opinion, and I sat there. Apparently I went ghost white, and the guy looked at me. He's like, "I'm so sorry. It's just a filling." And I was like, "Oh no, it's not the filling you recommended. It's the 3 crowns you didn't recommend." And he's like, "Whoa, tell me what happened." I did. And, he sat there super nice, just what you expect out of a dentist, showed me the x-ray. He showed me, "Hey, you see these little white lines? That's probably what they were pointing to." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, I feel horrible this happened to you, but I'm going to tell you since you asked." And goes, "That stuff, it's just cement from back in the day. It shows up clear on x-rays. They used to use it all the time. You probably got these done a while ago. Because there's nothing here that indicates that you need any work done." I said, quite frankly, this just looks normal. It's just easy to manipulate people into thinking it's bad. And that was eye-opening to me. That was before I worked in dentistry, so I didn't know. But I figured out very quickly that insurance was not what mattered. I had spent like $4,000 there already. Had gotten crowns I didn't need. And then, I could have just paid a fee-for-service doctor and just paid for the dang cleaning and the filling, not paid for the dental insurance, and been fine. So I got rid of dental insurance after that.
Yeah, no, it sounds so basic, but I think before we used to just think, you go to dentist A, you should get the same opinion as dentist B because they're both dentists and they were trained in similar ways, but that's just not the case, and it's pretty scary.
No, it is, and we really thought they were all the same, but they're just not.
Yeah.
The public is waking up, because even to this day, I went to my new dentist, and the dentist wasn't going to throw anyone under the bus immediately, but the hygienist, she was like 65 years old, and she didn't care. And she takes one look in my mouth and goes, "Have you been to," and says the name of it. And I was like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She goes, "You got a lot of dental work for a young man."
Yeah.
All right. That's fantastic. We're off to a great start here. But yeah, it's everywhere. And yeah, we have a couple articles here. One's a little bit newer than the other, but we did want to bring up this Senate investigation because, people have gotten in trouble. So you mentioned this Medicaid debacle. So I think what's happening, to nobody's shock, is, hey, you're required, or you have to produce a certain amount of dentistry, and the people making you produce that don't care as much. Like, one of these articles referenced that the manager that was giving the instructions on how much to produce was formerly a Peer 1 imports manager.
I haven't seen a Pier 1 Imports in a while.
Yeah. And now you're sitting there. Now all of a sudden she's telling dentists what they're going to do, how much they need to produce. And it's just insane. And a couple of these articles, they used a Harvard dentist. I think he teaches at the dental school to compare and look what was going on. And it was just shocking what was going on.
Yeah, and to tell everybody basically what these articles are covering is they found a lot of these corporations, bigger dental corporations, who they operate like any other corporation that you might think of. You know, there's managers, there's quotas that have to be hit, there's morning huddles, similar to your morning huddles, but very different. Where in the morning huddles, it's all about production. It's all about telling the offices that they're not producing as well as the other offices, putting the offices to compete. So it puts this pressure on the dentist, the hygienist, really anyone in the practice to overtreat and overproduce and just hit numbers because their livelihoods and their jobs are at stake.
Yeah, there was a whistleblower in one of the articles, and it was a dental assistant, and she walked out, went to the office manager, was like, I will not walk back in that room and be a part of what's going on. Nothing got done about it. She reported it to the corporation. They didn't do anything. So she went to the dental board of the state.
Was this in Ohio?
It was in Ohio.
Yeah.
And the dental board didn't do anything about it, which, you know, wasn't very shocking. If you know anything.
Well, there's 4 investigators, I think, in Ohio, and there's like over 500 investigations going on. So I'm not surprised they couldn't get to it.
So I know a few people have been on the board for South Carolina and North Carolina, and it was funny. I had somebody called me and said, "Are you sure I can give a $10 gift card every time a patient refers?" And I was like, "I'm sure of that. You can't incentivize them. You can't tell them I'm going to do it if you refer, but if they refer, you can show them a token of appreciation." He didn't believe me. I said, "Hey, look, I know the incoming South Carolina president. I'm going to call him and I'm going to ask him." And I asked him that question and he just burst out laughing. He was like, "Dude, do you know how much stuff that's real that we have to deal with? Like, we got to look at overtreatment and figure out if dentists need to lose their license. Do you think we care about somebody giving a $10 gift card? Like, that is not hitting our radar screen of something we're going to investigate here. Like that's insane. We got real problems we're trying to figure out here." So fortunately, I think a lot of the dental boards are dentists that are privately owned. I don't know that they're as corrupted as maybe some of the corporate world. But, you know, there's a few of them and there's a ton of this stuff going on. And, you know, to some extent too, I mean, we're probably guilty of this as well. You know, nobody wants to be the person that tells on another dentist and has them lose their license. You know, we see people come in with tax fraud on their, tax return and, "Oh, CPA told me to do it." And we don't ever turn the CPA in, right? I mean, it's just not what people naturally do. Like, hey, you need to leave this person and make your life better. But, we're not going to be the ones. And, truthfully, these people probably deserve it. Probably need to get back to a society where, hey, if somebody's doing something, you need to go to the board and tell them, because there were some just outrageous stories in here of people getting root canals on teeth that need to get pulled. And to make it worse, like tiny children.
Yeah. And it's all of that stuff is very insurance driven, right? Because if somebody comes in and you have a production quota to hit and you realize that if you have a root canal that Medicaid pays like $1,200 for, and then you're going to have to extract the tooth later anyways, then you're getting paid twice, versus if you actually made the right decision, you would have just extracted the tooth. But that didn't provide you with any money. So it's just, we've always talked about this too, how insurance dictates a lot of this stuff as well, but people are just choosing what procedures and coding them what they want in order to get more money and really, go up to their superiors to make them happy.
No, now this was the shocking thing I saw in these articles. There's another reason that this is being driven this way. And I was shocked to see it in an article about dental overtreatment. But it's back to part 1 of this 2-part private equity series. They had figured out that all these dental practices had been bought with debt by private equity firms. And they had put the connection together that they have to service the debt, so they have to keep the production up, and that's what's driving a lot of this stuff. So, we don't want to sit here. Not every group dental practice, every private equity backed thing, not everyone is the same. So don't take this as they're all bad.
Yeah, there's good ones out there. We know a lot of them. We know a lot of doctors that have worked with good groups.
Oh, absolutely. We know doctors that have sold and are just super happy with the group they're working for. We're going to come back to that, though, on how it relates to should you do it or not do it. But again, we're not demonizing all of them. We're just getting what's out there in the public realm, what's been investigated, what's been looked at. I mean, there were a lot of fines paid in a lot of these situations. So it's out there, it's in the open. And, I think the more shocking part we found, and it's actually not shocking, I think we already knew, but, we don't like to sit there and publicly call out something we don't know to be true. But a lot of these investigations found out that production numbers were being driven by non-dentists.
Oh, yeah.
And
which is why there are rules why dentists can't own, or non-dentists can own dental corporations. But as we probably saw in the article, there's workarounds to that, right, Wes?
No, absolutely. So that's another, I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. That's another interesting tidbit. But I know I don't call this company by name. I'm protecting, the person that told me. But I mean, I specifically had somebody call me. They just heard a podcast, said, hey, you might want to know this. So if you do have something we might want to know, we'll keep you private. We're not going to say the company name, anything. But please call us. The more we know, the more we can help other dentists. But he called me up and goes, hey, you were talking on this podcast, but you were missing a piece on how the treatment gets done. And I was like, yeah, do you know? He goes, oh, yeah, I work there. And he just told me, he goes straightforward. I walk into the chair, I do the exam. He goes, I wasn't the one that recommended the treatment. And then somebody in the background, he said a manager did it. So he didn't specifically tell me non-dentist, but I got the point. Non-dentist in the background, he said, I don't even know who that person was. We said when he went to do treatment, it wouldn't be the same person that he had done an exam for. So he'd be blindsided. And basically, he said, hey, I get to the point where I've numbed the patient and now I realize they don't need dental work. And he's like, it just put me in a gut-wrenching scenario. And this doctor, I mean, he basically told me, he was like, look, I don't know what I'm doing next, and I really don't have any money, and I got a ton of student loan debt, and this is bad, but I can't walk back in there. Can you help me? Yeah. We had to help him find somewhere to go and, get a practice, and we were able to help him, which was great, but he just straight up said, I can't take another day of it. This is insane the way we're treating people, and that's the part about these private equity-backed firms, how it relates to dentistry is, they're in there to drive up revenue and cut costs. Yeah. So materials probably going down and revenue needs to go up. So we got to do more dentistry, and we got to find the dentistry out of people that maybe it wasn't there before. So sometimes you lose the autonomy. Like a lot of these things, one company was found to be sending out monthly reports to everybody, and they would put the dentist and the office and the production numbers and the average. This was probably the most disgusting piece, was the average treatment per patient that came through there. And they were tracking all this, and they were making it public and pitting the dentist against each other to drive up the average production per patient, which is just, I mean, that's insane.
Gosh, yeah.
And, it was like that's not what dictates treatment. If a patient doesn't need anything, a patient doesn't need anything. And we see this, right? They were talking, one of the companies defended themselves by saying, well, this is the statistics on average that we got from this reputable source. So because of that, this doctor's under treating.
Yeah, I think it was in regards to like maybe perio maintenance or something like that. It's like, don't quote me on this, but it's like, the ADA or someone posted a statistic about how many people really have perio disease. So we need to get up to that number. But even that institution came out and said, no, these statistics shouldn't drive treatment or increase treatment for an individual patient.
Yeah, we see this all the time because we actually use these statistics with dental practices we work with. So we use them. However, we ask questions. Like on the perio, a lot of times we say, hey, is this something, what's going on with the patient base? A lot of times in a well-to-do white-collar neighborhood close to a city, there's just not as much perio there. And they say, look, it's just not there. I know a practice in particular I'm thinking of. He goes, we run a glorified hygiene department. All of our patients take care of their teeth. There's not tons of work. And it was true. The hygiene production was about equal to the doctor production. There's quite a few of them in the same area I know about where it's just, hey, it is what it is. We'd love to do more dental treatment, but it's just not here.
It's just not there, yeah.
So we don't have it to do. Other times we ask, I remember practice in Southwest Virginia, I pointed out, crowns and endo were just extremely low. And I was like, dude, there's something here. So I asked them, and they were like, dude, it's our demographic. We recommend it because it's the right thing to do. But our demographic, their next question out of their mouth is how much to pull the tooth.
Yeah.
And they said we give them the honest answer and we recommend the treatment. But when we tell them it's not that much money to pull the tooth, they just pull the tooth and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, that's why it's lower. And we can't control that. All we can do is educate to the best of our ability. But ultimately, if they make the decision to pull the tooth, we're pulling the tooth, and we're making less money, but it was the patient's decision. We gave them everything available. So, it's just to say, hey, we use the statistics. I don't have anything against them, but we never sit there and tell somebody, you absolutely need this many crowns. We more sit there and go, hey, is your number lower because you're not recommending the proper treatment, or you're putting too large of fillings that you're going to do a crown later on because you feel guilty for the patient? Is there something else? Can they not afford it? Or is it just that they don't need crowns? Because if they don't need crowns, that's the end of the conversation, right? If you sit there and tell me, no, I recommend every crown that needs to get done, and my patients, they do it, we just don't have as many of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We can't manufacture crowns.
Yeah. No, and I was talking to a private dentist this morning, and we were talking about just this, and she was saying, well, Mario, I'm treating my patients well. I'm recommending what I should. They're super happy. They're raving to other patients about me. Like, what should I do from a marketing perspective? And I'm just sitting there looking back at her, and I say, you just described it, right? Like that is marketing. As soon as you overtreat someone and they tell someone else, your reputation is at stake. But if you treat people well, if they know that they're getting the right opinion from you, they're going to tell other people. And that's the greatest marketing tool you could ever ask for.
No, definitely. I was going to come back to something. What was it? Do you remember? We'll think of it.
Not the Medicaid?
Was it the Medicaid? I don't know. We'll come back to it. But that kind of twists this around to, okay, they're here. They're not all the same. What should you think about when selling to them? Or should you sell to them? Should this preclude you from selling to them? So I think to start it off, this is a transition option. And when you are transitioning your practice, you should consider every single transition option. Because to be very blunt with you guys, we're not necessarily anti-DSO what they're doing. We're definitely not pro-DSO what they're doing. We're just what's in the doctor's best interest. So there's been plenty of people that call up to this place. And when I say plenty, 90% of the people that call up here looking to sell to a DSO, somebody in the building talks them out of it and goes, this just isn't for you. Like, have you actually considered X, Y, and Z? And most of the time we ask them, oh, well, why are you doing it? Everyone else is, and everyone's getting all this money. We have to explain to them that's not really the case. But let's say you are in those group of practices, should any of this preclude you from doing it? Or how would you use this information, Mario, to try to make an informed decision on whether or not you should sell to a DSO?
If I'm talking to someone, I would probably look at two main things. Number one, what is the actual offer? And that's important because a lot of people look at the offers and they say, oh, well, I'm getting 10 million. But really, when you take a deeper dive at what the details of that offer is, it's a lot less. A lot of it's tied up in the stock of this company, which you don't know what it's worth. There's stringent, maybe work-back requirements.
Yeah, if you want to know about that stock, go back to last month's episode.
Other episode. And basically, to summarize, the last episode is you don't know what that stock is really worth. But a lot of doctors are going to this option because somebody told them that the stock is going to be very lucrative down the road. So number one is, what is the actual offer, and is it actually meeting your financial needs, right? Because a lot of people want to sell to the DSO because it's going to get them across the finish line of retirement. But once you sell and then you realize that stock wasn't really worth what you thought it was worth, and you sold your biggest asset and you didn't reach your retirement goals, now we're in trouble, right? Are you really going to go back and try to open a practice somewhere outside of maybe where the non-compete is? It's just ugly. Number two, which I think is equally important, is the emotional side of it all. A lot of people decide they don't want to sell to DSOs. And once again, focusing here on maybe the ones that don't have a good reputation because they have built a reputation in their town for 25, 30, 35 years. and now they're selling it to someone who might not actually take care of their patients, and that's not a good feeling to have. So I think the second part is, who do you want to leave your practice to, and do you actually want to work back for someone, or instead would you rather just sell it to someone you know and trust and maybe has a similar treatment philosophy as you?
Yeah, and I'm going to put number 3 in here, which is, are they actually giving me more money?
Yeah.
Right. When I look at the end of the day, if most of them are going to make you work back 5 years. So if I work back 5 years, I keep the profit and I sell it to Dr. New for a certain amount of money. Is that amount of money I received less than, by a good shot, the amount of money the DSO is going to give me?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where there's a lot of confusion, a lot of people trying to get doctors to sell to earn the commissions. A lot of times it's not, especially in one doctor practices, especially in the GP world, just on how this stuff works. It's just oftentimes not much more money. And if you're looking apples to apples and you're going to get the same, and oftentimes you actually get more money by just keeping your practice till the day you want to leave and selling it to Dr. New. It really is. Most of the time you'll get more money in your pocket doing that than you will selling to a DSO. If I'm not getting more money, why am I doing it? And you got to make a hard look in the mirror and go, okay. And then this one's tough. And I've had to sit down and, you do the flip side of that because it exists. And I've had to sit down and tell people they're selling to DSOs, so they're ultimately just anti-DSO, where we sit down and go, look, your practice, for whatever reason, if it's you have a super low overhead rate, you've just got a very desirable, and whatever it is, if I look at these two numbers and go, look, you're getting $3-4 million more by selling it to a DSO. Depending on your financial situation, we're going to have a very serious talk about this, because some doctors, it is life-changing money. Yeah. So we don't want to dog them when they do give you life-changing money and that's the right option. Sometimes you got to do it. And I mean, if it's $500,000 more to sell to the DSO over the 5-year period and you're financially secure, I usually flip that to somebody and I tell them, what do you want to do? This $500,000, if it's not going to change your life, you're going to have to work back for them. What do you want to do? Some people, though, I sit there and I look at it and go, hey, if you sell to Dr. New, you're on the verge. You'll be retired, but, we ain't going first class. However, what your practice worth this DSO, it's an extra few million. This is life-changing money. Like,
yeah.
I hate to be the one to tell them to do it, but I'm like, look, I'm here looking out for you, and this absolutely can be the best thing for you to do.
And for some people, Wes, it might be the only option, right? I think we talk to a lot of doctors who maybe want to have a bigger and bigger and bigger practice, but we say, hey, what's the end goal? Because if you get to a practice that big and you hate DSOs, well, that might be your only option out.
No, definitely. I've got one in particular where, we helped him. He had an offer. We helped him get like an extra $1.5 million. So he's super happy about that one. But he's like, I really don't want to do this. And I was like, okay, well, great. Let's call the associates, because they're the ones with the work history. The bank will be willing to do this. Like, we can make this work if they will bite at the apple. But they didn't want anything to do with it. They were willing to work for the DSO. And we're kind of sitting there and we're like, dude, it's not that it's really worth more to the DSO than it is an individual. It's just the fact this thing is $5 million. Like,
yeah, who's going to buy it?
I don't know. It's like, you can sit here and you can try to sell it, but if you get 3 years down the line, you can't sell it, and we're back to the DSOs anyways. Now you're working an extra 8 years instead of 5 years. So in those really large practices, sometimes it's just, hey, look, this is what's going to get you across the goal line. But and they're not all created equally. There are many of them that, when this started, it was really just, we're here to make money.
Yeah.
And that gave it a horrible reputation. Some of those are still in existence and still giving it a horrible reputation. Then they realized, we got to keep these doctors happy if we want to have a shot at being successful. So that was iteration number 2. And eventually some doctors decided that they could do this better. And they went and go, hey, went to private equity people, hey, we want to do this. And we know how to do it better than you do. We want to partner with you. You've got to keep the patients happy, you knuckleheads. So now we're at a point where a lot of these DSOs, again, we're not here to dog every single one of them. They do treat the patients with respect. They do want to make that patient experience. They realize that that's their key to success on making money, is keeping patients very happy. However, we got to circle back. how do private equity groups make money, right? They build them, make them more profitable, and then they go to sell them to more money. That's their end game. You don't know who they're going to sell to. In that part of it, I remember we had a doctor he was going to sell to a very, very reputable group, and he did. And the group had a stellar reputation. Doctors are all happy. It was an exciting thing for him to do, and he was worried about this very thing. So he sat there across the table, and he just looked at the guy and goes, well, what happens if your private equity backer changes? And to this group's credit, the guy just looked at him and goes, look, that's going to suck for me and you both. Because if they're going to do something like that and they're going to make us crank up, revenue per patient or whatever it is they're going to go after, it just self-admitted. They're going to can me too. Like, you're not the only one in that boat.
And it's pretty common, right? Based on all these articles we've read, those groups change all the time.
Yeah, they change. And when they do, sometimes they bring in new management teams. So you really got to think about that one. But yeah, there's a lot just going on in this world. And I think big takeaways. I remember what we're going to come back to. So that's going to be an interesting one. But big takeaways for you if you're considering it. Hey, we're not against it. Everyone should at least consider it and figure out, is this a viable option for me? However, most of you are going to discover that my practice is not actually worth a whole lot more to a DSO. Mm-hmm. They'll give me more upfront payment. Some of it will be in stock, though, I can't get my hands on. And then I'll have to work back for 5 years, give up the profit. And what we talked about in the first one was what they do is they straddle the businesses with debt, and the businesses have to basically pay off their own debt. So what they're doing to your practice is they're straddling it with the debt. They're forcing you to stay and continue production so the profitability stays, and they're paying off the loan with your profit. Mm-hmm. And that's why it just, you look at the numbers, most of the time, unless your practice has characteristics that make it very sellable to a DSO, most of the time you're going to be better off keeping the profit for 5 years. That's what would have paid off the loan. And then you go to Dr. New and they give you a nice number for it. It's not as nice as the DSO. I call it the dinner party number. You don't get the dinner party number, but hey, you still get a really nice number. And to the positive that we've talked about on this podcast and elsewhere, and really right here in this newsletter. If you're not getting this newsletter, you need to make sure you get it. All this information and much, much more for $300 a year. You get it delivered to your door, sitting on your desk till you read it. It's a must read. I was actually talking to a dentist yesterday. He wanted to know if he should come in for our tax and business planning. He told me he had done everything in this newsletter for the last 10 years. So I poked around, asked questions, and he goes, "Are you impressed?" And I was like, "Honestly, I am." And he's like, "What should I do?" And I just told him, I was like, "Look, I don't know that you need me." And, he wanted me to take a look. Like, I don't know what I'm looking for. You're going to pay so much per hour so how about you just come to one of our seminars and make a decision? And, hey, you get a day, you'll figure out if you need it or not, but you might just get a pat on the back. So make sure you're getting this. If not, McGillHillGroup.com/seminars. I
think one of the biggest things I found, Wes, too, I don't know if it's the younger generation, but you get all these email newsletters nowadays. They kind of get lost in the inbox. And I've heard from a lot of young dentists that they actually really like the print version that gets to their home. They read it maybe at breakfast or before they leave versus just deleting a bunch of emails online.
I mean, I do it. It drives my wife up a wall, but I get my newsletters for tax stuff sent to the house.
Yeah.
My wife's like, "Can you throw this away?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "It's just on a pile." I'm like, "It's in the pile because I'll throw it away after I read it."
Yeah.
But I have to read it. So make sure you're getting it because we really put all the details in there. All the devil in the details is in it. But we talk a lot about what practices have the characteristics, what don't. If you have the characteristics, this can be good. If you don't, though, in all likelihood, you're going to be better selling. But the entrance of the DSOs has actually raised the average sales price, which is really, really neat to think about. Dental practices, not to say they were undervalued, but, the banks were putting caps on kind of, hey, what a practice could be worth. So if you have one of these practices, like we just did one where the practice sold for about 125% of revenue. Now, on average, practices are worth 70% of revenue is what we've always heard. That's deceiving. Some are worth 20% of revenue. Mm-hmm. Some are sell on a per patient basis just because they're not that sellable. And others, like this one, sold for 125% of revenue. No questions asked. The buying doctor was so excited to get in there and buy it. And it's truly because she saw the cash flow of it. The cash flow justified the price. Yeah. 10 years ago, out of your mind if we were going to sell one for over 100%. These days, not a big problem. Banks are willing to play ball. They understand that, hey, if we want to stay in this market, we want to make these loans, we're going to have to keep up with valuations. Now, it's never going to be the same number you get from a DSO because then you're required to work back for 5 years. Yeah. But that gap is getting bridged a whole lot closer than it was. So that's great news for everyone selling a practice. Now, again, it's not to say everybody's practice value went up, but if you've got one of these that are a target to a DSO, make sure you reach out to us if you're thinking at transitioning because, hey, that thing may be worth more than you think. And some of that's going to be location based, what the demand is. I mean, I hate to break this one to you, but if you're in the dang middle of nowhere and somebody comes and you want 120% and cash flow justifies it and they offer you 80%, 80% is going to be better than shutting the doors.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're sitting here in Charlotte and you're thinking of selling and the valuation justifies 125%, it's going to sell for that if it's justified. But this will move into our last topic, something I found funny. This is an old Senate investigation.
Yeah, you're smiling way too much, Wes. I'm excited.
I talk about this one. It's a risk. And I talk about this when people say, oh, well, this dental practice is going to go public. And I go, it's not. I don't think any of these are going to go public. I could get proven wrong. I'm not world's genius. However, in most states, you have to be a dentist to own a dental practice. So if you know what the term friendly doctor is, it's the dentist that owns the corporation that doesn't receive any profits out of it. So these days, you're seeing a lot more of the models go in that the doctor retains 30% ownership. So they do it as a sub-DSO structure. I haven't confirmed why, but I'm thinking maybe the legal teams are thinking they're at risk because they've got a doctor's name on a corporation, but the doctor doesn't actually get any of the profits from it. So it's not truly doctor owned. It's just a mechanism around it. And I think it was Chuck Grassley. I know how to say his name. We're gonna botch this, so I do apologize for this guy from Montana. But there was a Republican and Democrat that did that. His first name, we got it. It's Max. Mario, best guess on how to say his last name.
I want to guess Max Baucus.
Baucus. I think I'm going with yours. I was going with Bocus. But Max Baucus, Baucus. I don't even know if he's a senator anymore.
We can call him Max B.
Yeah, Max B. I like that. He was a Democrat from Montana that got together with Chuck Grassley, a Republican in Iowa, and I have no idea. I think Grassley's still there. I'd never heard Max B's name before, though, so he might not even be there anymore. But they did this investigation, came up with a report, and their recommendation was for the states to start enforcing their own laws. And just said, you can put an end to this right now by just enforcing your own laws. So the reason these things aren't going public, which could impact that ability, is when you go public, you're subject to a lot of disclosures. Well, if you start having to disclose that, you've got friendly doctors owning these things, but they're not really owners, like, do you open yourself up into a Department of Justice or a state investigation where they squash the whole thing and all of a sudden you're left selling them for pennies on the dollar? So that's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
I'm not on that side of the table, which next time I see one of my private equity guys, I'm going to ask them what they think their risk is. I'm sure they think it's zero because they made their management fees, but I want to see if they actually think there's risk there. I have no idea. I'm not an attorney, but I just found that tidbit very, very interesting because you are supposed to be a doctor to own a dental practice, or you're supposed to be a dentist to own a dental practice.
Wes, I think I told you somebody called in a couple months ago. It was like someone, friend of a friend or something like that, and they were just very interested in getting into dentistry. And then I find out that they're not a dentist. So it's like people are starting to get interested in this industry because they think there's money involved, and they have already figured out that there's workarounds to the whole I don't have to be a dentist part of it.
Yeah, and that part's crazy to me. And to some extent, it's still going to work because you can't switch the public's minds. Like, I don't know if you get these calls, but every time someone gets a big treatment, it's usually my wife's friends. They call her like, what does your husband think? And every single time this phone call happens, they've gone to some corporate shop that takes every insurance. They've gone because they're insurance. And I'm like, no, you need to go see, here's your doctors, go see one of these. And some of them do it, but the overwhelming majority do not listen to me and will not go see a dentist that is fee for service. And one of the funniest instances I have is there's a book club in our neighborhood, All the Wives. And for those of you listening regularly, Tyler and I went to college together. He lives in the same neighborhood, so we hang out a lot. Him and his wife and my wife are in the book club, and like once every other month they get us all together. And the Patterson sales rep that's actually in the building right down there, we can see it out the window. You guys can't see the window, but we can see it. He's there. So me, him, and this other guy are having a beer, and he starts asking us what we do. And he's like, I never knew dentistry was that big. We're like, yeah, there's a whole world of industry around dentistry. And this guy just starts telling us the most ridiculous stories of getting mad at the pediatric dentist because he had to pay $100 out of pocket, and now he went somewhere else and he chases this stuff around. And me and him tried to explain to him that, your problem is that you're going places off of insurance. You need to pay the out of pocket fee. And I mean, we could not convince this guy. We're just sitting there like, I asked him, I'm like, I thought it was interesting, a sales rep. Like, he sells dental equipment and supplies. And I was like, what do you think of it? He goes, I'll never go to an insurance-driven practice. Like, that's insane. Like, I know enough about it. I know these guys. I will only go to a fee-for-service dentist. We were laughing. I was like, oh, who do you go to? And I knew who it was. It's not who I go to. But, he had clearly, with his knowledge, he had also discovered, absolutely not. I'm only going to the most reputable dentist. And, he's working for Patterson. He's like, I don't know if he has dental insurance. I'm like, no, my kids, everyone, like, we don't mess around on that.
Well, just think about it this way. We've been reading these articles about people getting 9 more crowns than they need. Well, what if you just paid an extra $50 or $100, whatever, to go see an independent opinion, and then you didn't get recommended those things, so it actually might be cheaper.
Oh, it's definitely cheaper. I've been down that road.
Yeah.
Like I will laugh. My dentist, and I might have said his name on this podcast a few times. I love my dentist. He's phenomenal. But I go in there last time, and I now that I'm in there, I kind of look. I'm like, oh, that's a hole in my tooth. And he's like going through. He's like looking good, and he hadn't finished yet. I was like, no, you're not there yet. I got a cavity. He's like, no, I think you look good. And he goes like, one more tooth. He feels the hole, and he goes, oh, yeah, you got a cavity there. I'm like, yeah, I saw it. He's like, not a big deal. It's whatever, out of pocket. I can't quote exactly what it was. I think I paid him like $250 to fill a cavity. And I'm like, I couldn't be happier than a guy trying to sit there as I'm telling him there's a hole in my tooth. And he's going, I don't know about that. And he's like, okay. Like, that's the type of dentist you want to go to. You don't go to the person that, they haven't even looked in your mouth yet, and you got 4 holes. They're just going to find out which ones they're going to say are holes.
And that was one of the examples of one of the patients, they got recommended something like that, and she was like, how could you tell? You didn't even do an x-ray, or you didn't do this, you didn't even look in my mouth. And he was like, oh, I just know. And she trusted him. So and
I think in the story, she went and got a second opinion, and the dentist told her, no, there's nothing wrong with your mouth. And her immediate reaction was, can you please look again? And he had to sit down with her and be like, yes, I'll look again, but there's nothing. And they even had the x-rays in the article, and they had the Harvard dentist review it to see what he found in the x-rays. And, he couldn't find anything. So, it's a little bit of a wild world. So, big takeaways, though. I think we're getting up on our time here, a little longer today, but this is a topic we get pretty excited about. Big takeaways, though, hey, look, we're not against selling to them. A lot of people might get a lot more money, and if it's going to financially change your life meaningfully, you definitely need to consider it. However, you need to be very, very careful, know who you're selling to. Don't sell to a group that is going to screw you over. Make sure you have somebody that can guide you. Sell to a group that you're going to be happy with. Like I said, we probably tell 90% of people that call up here thinking they're going to sell to a DSO that they're not selling to a DSO. So make sure that if it's right for you, but also you've just got somebody good that's going to guide you. Jonathan and Wade here, they do all the guiding dentists to it. They do a phenomenal job, and they're the only practice brokers in the industry that tell 90% of the people, no, you can't do this. But when it is time to do it, they make sure they get people with really, really good talent that, hey, this group's going to work out. You're going to be happy here. But otherwise, very interesting things going on in the industry. And we are seeing it flip back to where this is more publicly out there. And, they're educating the public as to this. So hopefully that continues to happen, because the more that the public is educated on the benefits of a independent doctor, the more the independent dentists are going to be able to survive and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, make sure for those of you listening that aren't members of the McGill and Lyon Dental Advisory, make sure you become a member, because we actually have an hour-long video podcast that we do once a month, sometimes twice, and we go into all of the details in that. We're not hiding anything. It's super valuable information. $300 a year. You get it mailed to your house. Plus, you get access to the long-form video content where we don't hold back. So make sure you're subscribing to that. Otherwise, can't wait to be with you all next episode. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the like. Leave us a review if you loved it. If you didn't, let us know. Please don't blow us up, but hey, let us know. You can always email or call in. We would love to hear from you if you have any topics, anything that we want to cover. Actually had a subscriber yesterday tell me, hey, could you do a series in your newsletter on how to retire early?
Yeah.
I love that feedback. He's like, you don't have to. I'm like, no, if that's what you want to hear about, that's what I want to write about. That's what we want to talk about. So we always love to hear your ideas. We're doing this for you, nothing else. So, please let us know anything we can do to help. Otherwise, we'll be back next time.
All right. Looking forward to it.